Welcome everyone to the Lo-Fi Poli-Sci Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in-your-face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. The news, fresh off the press. Source, Reuters, World Section. UN says mostly women and children among 32 killed as insurgents, Myanmar military clash. Earlier in the week, we brought you news of this conflict in the Rakhine state of Myanmar. A note to Lo-Fi Poli-Sci students on the title of this article using the word insurgents. Remember, one person's rebel or insurgents is another person's freedom fighter. We must always be aware of perspectives and the story behind such labels before making our own analysis. The implications. The story continues by stating that 3 separate groups are in armed and open conflict with the military, which is reportedly shelling and using airstrikes daily in the area, along with burning homes and schools in the region. This tactic of slash and burn is consistent with the method used to drive nearly 1 million Rohingya from the region and country within the past 2 years. The armed groups had asked for a ceasefire due to the current global conditions. The military has refused to ease up on their attacks. A question to Lo-Fi Poli-Sci students. Will the military decide to take part in a ceasefire, all things considered? Or do we believe that the military will continue their attacks without discrimination of combatant or civilians? Write in and let me know your thoughts. Next up, source, Reuters World. Chinese and Malaysian ships in South China Sea standoff. Sources. Again, earlier this week we brought you news of conflict and competition between China and Australia for influence in the South Pacific. Today we bring you news of conflict and competition over rights to different parts of the South China Sea. The implications. It's been reported that as many as 10 Chinese ships have been harassing the Malaysian ship, along with a Vietnamese ship being present, in recent days. There is great conflict over the rights in the sea by China, the Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, as well as other countries. China has even begun building islands in the South Sea to create military installations to exert greater control of the area. This international dispute has been going on for years, and it doesn't seem that any international body or international institution possesses the power to mitigate this conflict. It'll be interesting to see, if at all, how this dispute is managed and resolved in the future. Now moving on, it's Freedom House Friday featuring Honduras today. Let's remember that Freedom House creates a freedom score from 0 to 100 based off of the levels of civil liberties and civil rights in a country, as well as 3 categories of free, partly free, and not free. Honduras borders Guatemala to the west, El Salvador to the south and west, Nicaragua to the south and east, and the Caribbean Sea to the north. And Honduras comes in at 45 out of 100, down from last year at 46 out of 100. Honduras is even with Mozambique, just higher than Togo, and just under Guinea-Bissau and the Gambia. To quote the overview of Freedom House, institutional weakness, corruption, violence, and impunity undermines the overall stability of Honduras. Journalists, political activists, and women are often the victims of violence, and perpetrators are rarely brought to justice. End quote. The implications. A major key development in the country from 2019 was that the president's brother, and the former president were all identified as co-conspirators in the president's brother's drug trafficking operation. The president's brother was convicted last year in the U.S. for drug trafficking. With such high-level links to government, it comes as no surprise that Honduras receives a 45 out of 100 partly free ranking from the Freedom House. We'll be watching you, Honduras, especially you, Mr. President, as this story is still currently developing in the U.S. Justice Department. And now for our headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, BBC News, World Section. Saudi princess appeals to king for release from detention. A daughter of the former king of the country from 1953 to 1964 has been in jail along with one of her daughters for reasons unknown to us and apparently to her as well. As her health has been deteriorating, she has made a plea to the king and royal court for her release. The background and implications of this story. There is a long history of strife for power within the House of Saud, the ruling family of Saudi Arabia. One only needs to look back to see how former kings were forced to abdicate, assassinated, princes even in recent years being arrested and detained in hotel prisons or die mysteriously in a helicopter crash. However, in the context of this story, Saudi Arabia is a patrimonial kingdom, meaning it can only be ruled by a male king. The daughter of a former king could never rule the country. Thereby, the princess should not be viewed as a potential threat. That being said, she is known as a reformist within the royal family, wanting constitutional change and making humanitarian issues her concern. A question. If the Crown Prince's Vision 2030 the plan for economic modernization, and to some extent, modernization in general, has shown by legalizing women to drive last year, then why is the princess in arbitrary detention? Just some food for thought. And a last piece of news from the CNN World section. Astronomers saw a star dancing around a black hole, and it proves Einstein's theory was right. That's right, Lo-Fi listeners. There's a black hole at the center of the Milky Way galaxy, and that's our galaxy, by the way, and a star is dancing around it like Einstein's theory of relativity predicted. And how exactly do they know this? Well, they've only been watching this one star for more than 27 years and collecting data on the orbit of the super black hole. The implications. Firstly, in science, as also stated in the article by the scientist, we never prove anything. We simply add more evidence to support our theories. So bad headlines, CNN. Secondly, super black holes, Milky Ways, dancing stars, the theory of relativity. Oh, I love it. A question to Lo-Fi Nation. Do you think Einstein could dance? Like a star? And if he could, would he at this news? Write in, wherever you are in the cosmos, Lo-Fi Nation. And when you're out tonight, looking up, let's all do our own little dance. For Einstein, for life, for each other. And know when we do, we're all dancing together. All Lo-Fi-like. Peace and well-being, Lo-Fi listeners. Peace and well-being. And that's a snapshot of what's going on in the world today. Please write in with your questions, comments, or requests of countries for our new segments to lofipolisci@planetmail.com. That's Lofi, L-O-F-I, poly, P-O-L-I, sci, S-C-I, @planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lo-Fi Poli-Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.